I'm at an ancient ruin in Phnom Penh, Cambodia.
And I figured that this would be a better time than ever to tell you about the craziest dream I've ever had. I used the air brackets on the word dream there because I believe it was actually more than a dream. And after I told you the story, let's see if you agree.
It took place about 7 years ago, just a couple of days after my father had passed away. During that time, the days leading up to his death and for a few days after his death, I was having all these really intense, vivid dreams, and a lot of them were about my father too. Even before he died, I was dreaming a lot about him. It was very strange, and the images were so clear and so intense. And so I was telling my cousin about these experiences that I was having, and she told me a theory. She said that possibly after somebody passes, that their spirit remains in this realm for a few days before it transitions fully to the other side, and that possibly my father was trying to communicate a message to me through dreams, and that's why my dreams have been so intense, because he was sending all this energy to me. And that sounded like a pretty crazy idea to me, but I resolved that I would at least be open-minded to the possibility that that could be true.
So that night, as I went to bed, I was thinking about this conversation, and I made an affirmation to myself that I would be open, and I spoke openly out loud to my father.
I said, Dad, if you are in fact trying to get a message through to me, then I am open to receiving it. I'm open to hearing what you have to say.
That night I had a dream, and at some point the dream cut.
And all of a sudden I found myself in a new dream. And in this dream I was back home in Central Oregon. And I was in this house, this strange house with all these really weird people. They were like just weirdos or drug addicts or something. And my father was there. And I was telling my dad about this dream that I just had, not realizing that I was still in fact dreaming. At some point though, as I began to tell him about this dream I had had,
I started thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, I'm in Central Oregon now. And I know I live in Portland now, and that's a 3-hour car drive. So, did I drive here?
But I don't remember driving, and surely I would remember driving, right? So,
maybe I walked. Yeah, I must have walked.
That doesn't make any sense either, because that would probably take me a whole day to do that, or more, and I definitely would remember that.
And then it dawned on me, oh my God, I'm still dreaming, I haven't woke up yet.
And as soon as I had that thought, I turned to my father, and he nodded. He nodded as if to tell me, yes, I know. So, and then I asked him, I was so confused, and I said,
Dad, what is this place? Who are all these people? Why am I here?
And he put his hand up really slow like this, and he said to me, he said, son, none of that matters right now. All that matters is me and you. And when he said that, everybody else in the room, all the furniture, the posters, the pictures, everything on the walls, they all vanished. And all that was left was my father and myself and an orange couch, which he laid on. And I became a small boy again. And I laid upon his chest like I did back in the day when things were good. And my father held me, and he told me about his life. My father grew up in the Bronx, New York, and he had a really tough life. Both of his parents were alcoholics, and his home life was really terrible. And so we actually found that it was easier for him to be out on the streets. So by the age of 13, he had joined a gang, and he got into criminal activity, and he started using drugs. These issues plagued him for all of his life. And because particularly of his drug use and his alcohol, he was a drunk. And he would do well for a period of time, but then eventually addiction would take hold of him again. And when he was sober, he was a great man. He was fun, he was loving, he was kind. But in his addiction, he was a monster. He's telling me about all these things, telling me about all these bad things that he did. And he said, I wish I would have been a better man. I wish I would have been a better husband to your mom. And I so wish that I could have been a better father to you and your brothers. And then he said to me, son, is there any chance that you can forgive me? And knowing his pain and his struggle, and knowing that he wanted to do good, I told him, yes, Dad, I forgive you. And then he said, "Thank you, son. That means everything to me. I love you so much." I said, "I love you too, Dad." And then he continued his story about his life. And when it got to the finale, his own death, he told me something very strange, which I didn't understand. He said, "I died with 3 shots of heroin in my gut." Really bizarre. And when he spoke about his own death, he vanished. And I fell to that orange couch below. And I lost it. I was a young boy, and I just lost my father, and I wept for him. I said, "Dad, where's my dad? I want my dad. Daddy, where are you?" And then I remembered, I'm dreaming. And I had been doing a lot of work with my dreams at that time, and I knew that once I realized I was dreaming, I could actually take control of my dream. So I stood up, and I looked at the couch in front of me, and I said, "Dad, come back." Nothing happened. So I said it again. "Dad, come back." Again, nothing happened. So I became more and more animated, more and more driven by emotion, and I started to cry, and I said, "Dad, come back. Dad, come back. Daddy, come back. I just want my daddy back. Dad, come back." And finally, after what felt like maybe a minute or two of trying this and being unsuccessful, I gave up. And I turned around in defeat, and to my surprise, behind me was this vast white open space. There were no borders, there were no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just white open space. And in the middle of that space was my father. He was sitting cross-legged, and he had like a white robe or a cloak over him. And there was this white light that was filling every cell of his body. And he was just glowing with this beautiful white light. It was so beautiful. And when I saw him, I could feel his peace. And then he said to me, he said, "Son, I'm going now, and I won't be coming back." And when he said that, that light grew more intense, and it engulfed his entire body, and then it shot out to fill that entire white space. And it came at me, and it struck me, and I could feel it enter my body. And it was as if it had communicated knowledge to me, information, wisdom, but nothing that I could express verbally, more of like a knowing in every cell of my body, a knowing that penetrated into my soul, and somehow my father's life wisdom and all of his lessons, it felt as if they had been transferred to me in that moment. And it was absolutely exhilarating. It was a profound feeling, and I felt so alive, and I felt so content in that moment that I no longer felt any sort of grief about the relationship I had with my father. I felt no grief whatsoever about him passing. I remember consciously deciding to let the space around me dissolve. I made the decision, and then the room or the space around me, it vanished. And then I made another decision to allow myself to vanish as well. And then I snapped awake. I went from being in the depth of sleep to instantly awake, so energized. I was so energized it felt as if I was in the middle of a basketball game. I jumped out of bed, and I immediately went to work documenting everything that I experienced. It was so profound, from the preliminary dream to telling my dad about the dream that I had, and then to realizing I was dreaming, to hearing his life story, and telling him that I forgave him, and telling him that I loved him, and then seeing that light burst forth out of his being, and for the energy to return to where it came. So, of course, I had to tell my brother about everything that I had experienced. I called him, and I began to tell him the story that I just told you. And then when I got to that point, when I said, and Dad said he died with 3 shots of heroin in his gut, and my brother Clint said, "What? What did he say?" I said, 3 shots of heroin in his gut. And I was like, no, it's weird, right? Like, I don't really know much about heroin, but I know it doesn't go in your gut. Like, I know you put it in your arm, at least that's what I've seen in the movies. And then Clint said to me, "Lennon, actually, I've got something really important to tell you, and I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want your experience to be any more difficult than it already is. But the reason that our father died is because he had these pills that were synthetic heroin. and that he had overdosed on them. So I find it absolutely profound that this message was given to me via dream, via quote dream. And I had no idea. I mean, I knew that my father struggled with drugs, and it wouldn't have surprised me if my brother had told me that he had died because of drug use. My brother and my father were living together at the time of his death. But I had no idea that heroin was something that you could take in a pill form and that you could have heroin in your gut. So that's my story of the most profound dream that I've ever had in my life. I'd like to ask all of you, what do you think? Was it a dream? Maybe it was just, my deeper psychology making up this elaborate dream to help me come to peace and to come to terms with my relationship with my father. Or maybe it was something more. Maybe my father's spirit or his energy was able to visit me in that moment, and then I witnessed his transfer to the other side. I would also like to know if you have ever had an experience like this. I haven't really talked to anybody who has, so it would be really good for me to hear some of your stories. And if you have had an experience like this, then make a comment for me or make a video and post it and send me the link and I'll check it out. All right, well, until next time, I love all of you. Peace.